Hi, I'm Marc Childs from Childs Davidson. Welcome to our video series on FMCG issues. A few months ago I produced a video about the work that Boston Consulting Group was doing with DeCA. That's the Defence Commissary Agency, the retailer that services the armed forces in the United States. I was critical because BCG seemed to be using the same process and the same playbook that they had used with the retailer Kohls in Australia that was subsequently ruled to be unconscionable. And I was disturbed by the fact that they were implementing something like that in the US market. Since that time, I've had a chance to interview some of the manufacturers that supply DeCA and also to look at some of the publicly available data. The picture is not a pretty one. Let me just back up for a moment and explain for those who aren't aware of DeCA or those who didn't see my last video. This retailer has the role of providing non-salary benefits to armed services personnel and their families around the world. It's subsidized by the Department of Defence with something called appropriations. And it operates on a cost-plus basis. So from the goods and services that are provided by manufacturers, it then adds a small percentage and provides those through its retail outlets, typically close to armed services facilities, wherever they are around the world. Now, Congress has been putting pressure on DeCA to reduce the amount of appropriation required. So DeCA has gone to Congress and sought approval to change the pricing mechanism to a variable pricing structure. That allows them, supposedly, to operate more like a private retailer and, I guess, as a result, generate a profit. As part of this plan, they're also implementing private label in the belief that private label can generate profit as well. The stipulation from Congress in changing the rules was that DeCA was not allowed to reduce the benefit that was being provided to patrons. In this process, BCG has been managing the program of implementation. And to many outsiders looking on, the idea of introducing variable pricing and therefore inevitably increasing some prices is very hard to reconcile with the idea of not reducing benefit, which after all is about prices. Unfortunately, this new strategy is proving to be disastrous for DeCA and for patrons as a result. In my view, it's a completely wrong focus that BCG is going after. Their whole approach right now is to focus on reducing the supply cost from manufacturers. Now that sounds okay on the surface, but what's really underlying this, I think, is the fact that they have a very lucrative incentive program that's pushing them to take this as the priority to go after. And as I'll explain to you shortly with some of the stats surrounding this, it's not a good idea and it's not producing results. So here are some basic performance stats about DeCA. Their sales turnover in 2017 is likely to be around about $5.5 billion US. So they're a substantial retailer. Unfortunately, their sales are declining annually at about 7%. So any idea that the DoD had of generating a profit from this retailer just goes out the window. It's very hard to think of any retailer in the world that might make money while they're declining at that kind of rate. And in fact, those that can sustain some kind of profitability while declining are doing things like closing stores that are unprofitable. And of course, DeCA can't do that because it's a service provider. Another important stat is that DeCA provides price or discounts on prices of the order of between 15 and 30% versus private retailers outside the gate. That's a pretty substantial benefit to patrons. However, of the 14 million or so patrons, including their families, only about 50% of them shop at DeCA. Quite a remarkable stat when you consider the price advantage that's available. An even worse number is that we estimate that maybe only 20% of the grocery wallet of those patrons is being spent at DeCA. And I ask, why is this happening and why is it not a central focus of any new strategy being pursued? So really, patrons should be flocking to DeCA and spending a lot more of their money there, given the pricing advantage that's available to them. If you compare, let's say, Walmart and Kroger, they do battle with pricing differentials of perhaps only 3 to 5% on average across their major selling lines. Yet, about 1/3 of DeCA patrons think that prices at DeCA are no better than private retailers. That's the kind of stat that keeps private retailers awake at night. And it blows my mind to think that that's not one of the primary focus areas of the current strategy of DeCA, to rebuild its sales, to build footfall, and to overcome this wrong perception about pricing differential. It's also very surprising to me that DeCA doesn't have an online offer. I've heard several comments that part of the reason for declining sales is that more people are living off base these days than they used to. But surely providing an online service would address that, especially when the pricing advantage is so significant. It would be a very powerful driver of sales performance online if they were to offer it. But here's the big issue that I think people need to recognize. BCG's primary focus is not on building footfall. It's not on improving price perception amongst patrons. It's not on creating an online offer. It's purely on trying to negotiate better prices from manufacturers. Now that sounds okay on the face of it, until you realise that DeCA is a relatively small retailer in the US context, and yet it's already getting best in market prices from most manufacturers. Yet, the incentive program that BCG negotiated themselves is generating enormous fees for them, so go figure. Of course they're focused on this issue, rather than on the right issues, and it's rumoured that they've generated fees in the order of $110 million for the work they're doing, while DeCA continues to decline, while its performance continues to deteriorate. The effort to implement private label has so far quite clearly been a failure, and there is no likelihood of generating a profit from DeCA. There are two significant things about this that really disturb me, besides the fact that BCG is employing a playbook that was already ruled by the authorities in Australia to be unconscionable. And those two things are this. Manufacturers, or at least most of them, regard it as their patriotic duty to support DeCA. They feel very strongly about providing good product at excellent prices to the armed services personnel of the US. And in being beat up by BCG in this negotiating process, they feel actually a little betrayed. That's what they're telling me. The other is that this is a non-cash benefit to patrons, and anyone who cares about supporting the armed services should be worried about it being eroded in this way. To any patron who might see this video, I would suggest that you call or write to your congressman. Tell them to stop messing with your benefit. I also suggest that you should be asking, why is DeCA not an outstanding retailer? I can't see any reason why they're not providing exceptional services to the armed services personnel that they are charged with providing support to. This is Marc Childs from Childs Davidson. Thank you for watching.